The morning it all unraveled was unseasonably warm for April in Chicago. I remember the way my heels clicked across the polished concrete floor of Lawson & Vale's headquarters, a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. My name is Meredith Lawson, but everyone called me Meri, and for the past 15 years, I had been the one holding the company together. Thursday was supposed to be our quarterly strategy session. Nothing fancy, just numbers, goals, a bit of catered lunch. But when I stepped into the conference room, something felt off. Gold and ivory balloons arched above the table lilies. My mother's favorite lined every corner. Champagne chilled on the sideboard, and a banner read, "A new era begins." My gut sank. Around the table sat our CFO legal counsel and my parents, all trying not to meet my eyes. Then I saw her, Claire, my older sister, the golden one, dressed in ivory, like a debutante, and smiling like the queen of a coronation. My mother's voice rang out, "Meri." "So glad you could make it." Claire's smirk was the punctuation mark on a betrayal I hadn't even been warned about. And then my father stood. "Today marks a fresh chapter," he announced. "Claire will be stepping in as CEO effective immediately." I didn't blink. Not because I was okay, but because I knew something they didn't. Not yet. I didn't clap. My hands stayed frozen at my sides, while the room erupted around me, cheers bouncing off the glass walls, like static in my ears. Claire stood at the head of the table, basking in the applause, as if she hadn't just gutted me in front of everyone I once trusted. I caught my mother's eye for a moment. She quickly looked away. My father's smile looked forced, as if he wasn't quite sure whether to feel proud or ashamed. I had scheduled this meeting. I had prepared the quarterly projections, the agenda, the deck, and now I was standing in the middle of my own ambush. I felt like a guest at my own funeral. I didn't speak, not yet. The room was shifting too fast, my pulse thudding loud in my ears. Claire began talking to the board about streamlining leadership and aligning with innovation, and I could hear the rehearsed rhythm in her voice. I barely noticed Alicia from HR approaching with a folder clutched to her chest. She didn't make eye contact, just slipped the envelope into my hands like it was a pity offering. I didn't need to open it. My name was typed across the front, and beneath it, in bold, the word that stabbed like ice through my chest: termination. My breath caught, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I looked to my parents again. Nothing. My father studied his shoes. My mother adjusted the lilies in the centerpiece. Claire walked toward me with that same polished stride she'd perfected over the years. She leaned in close and whispered, "It's not personal, Meri. You've simply outgrown your role." Outgrown. The word nearly knocked the air from my lungs. I wanted to laugh. I had built this place. I was the one who co-signed the first lease, negotiated the supplier deals, skipped birthdays, anniversaries, even Blake's treatment sessions when we thought the cancer might come back. I missed Grandpa's funeral to mediate a warehouse strike, and now I had been outgrown. I took the folder, nodded once, not at her, but at the empty space between us, and walked out. I didn't look back. The hallway felt longer than ever, every footstep louder than the last. I passed a young assistant carrying a cardboard box. My box. Inside was the framed photo from our first product launch, the walnut pen Dad gave me when we signed the incorporation documents, and my boss lady in progress mug. It was all done behind my back. Weeks, maybe months in the making. They had planned this, carefully, silently. Outside, the sun was blinding. I sat in my car and stared at the leather folder in my lap. I didn't cry, not yet. I drove home in a daze, every red light a breath I didn't know I was holding. When I stepped into my apartment, everything felt unfamiliar. I unpacked the box slowly, one item at a time, until my fingers touched the walnut pen. I held it for a long time, just staring at the initials engraved in gold ML. My father had said it then so proudly, "You're the future." Funny how easily people forget the things they say when they think you'll never need to remember. I wiped my eyes and reached into the box for a tissue when my hand brushed something tucked underneath the cardboard flap. It wasn't there before. A plain envelope unmarked except for my name in careful script. My heartbeat quickened. I opened it with shaking hands and pulled out a single sheet of thick embossed paper. The letterhead was from our legal firm. The date 4 years ago. My name. Claire's signature. A contract. Not severance. No something else entirely. And in that moment, the grief faded, replaced by a strange and steady calm. They had no idea what they'd just triggered. The paper was heavier than it looked. I held it carefully, afraid it might vanish if I blinked too hard. It wasn't a hallucination or some leftover memo. It was real, dated, notarized, and very, very binding. My eyes locked on the clause. I had nearly forgotten a 10% non-dilutable ownership stake in Lawson & Vale, triggered the moment I loaned the company emergency capital. The memory hit like a film reel jerking to life. Claire sobbing in my kitchen at 2 a.m., terrified we wouldn't make payroll. I wired $250,000 without question. She'd called me the backbone. Her words. Now she'd carved me out like I was just some assistant with good instincts. But that loan had come with terms. Terms she never expected to haunt her. I sat back in my chair and read it again, every word twice. My pulse steadied. My breath evened out. I wasn't erased. I still owned a seat at the table, technically and legally. Claire hadn't fired an employee. She'd tried to stage a quiet coup. And the best part, she didn't know I remembered. She didn't think I'd kept the paperwork. She was counting on me being the same Meredith. I'd always been the one who held her tongue, the one who picked family over leverage. But she was wrong. That Meredith died the moment I was handed a termination letter by someone I used to babysit. I stood, grabbed my keys, and headed for the garage. The door groaned open as sunlight spilled across the floor. I hadn't touched the boxes in the back corner in years. I pulled out file after file, tax returns, hard drives, dusty old receipts. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just that I'd know it when I saw it. Then I found it. A Navy folder labeled 2019, Claire Emergency. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were printed emails, bank transfer records, and taped to the cover a flash drive. I didn't hesitate. I slid it into my laptop and waited. One file, just one, audio. I clicked play. Meredith, I don't even know how to thank you. If I ever forget this, I shouldn't be in charge of anything. Claire's voice, tired, shaky, sincere. My hand tightened around the edge of the workbench. I played it again. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just sat there in the half-lit garage, the dust swirling in the late afternoon sun, and I started planning. This wasn't grief. This wasn't heartbreak. This was war. I packed the contract, the flash drive, and every document that mattered into my old leather tote, the same one Dad gave me when I closed my first deal. I needed air, neutral ground, somewhere quiet to think. I drove to a small cafe I used to frequent before work took over my life. I ordered a green tea, sat in the farthest booth, and opened my laptop. Every breadcrumb I'd left behind over the years, emails, memos, annotated reports, I began gathering them like ammunition. They thought I'd disappear. They thought I'd fold. But I was never the weak one. I was just quiet. Then my inbox pinged. Subject, I don't agree with what they did to you. We should talk. Signed Clark Moreno. I stared at the screen. Claire's accountant. He never talked, never interfered. But if he was reaching out, something big was buried. And maybe I wasn't the only one with something to say. Clark Moreno had always been a background fixture, silent, precise, unshakable. He'd been our company's accountant for over a decade, the kind of man who knew every decimal before you did. If he was reaching out, it meant something had shifted. I replied without overthinking. I'm free tonight. Name the place. An hour later, I was walking along a dim stretch of Lincoln Avenue, the city slipping into dusk, its noise folding into itself. Clark's building was wedged between a yoga studio and a shuttered dry cleaner. I knocked twice. He opened the door with tired eyes and a hesitant smile. Inside his apartment was warm in that cluttered, overworked way. It smelled like burnt coffee and fabric softener. He motioned to a dining table stacked with USB drives folders and a yellow legal pad covered in frantic handwriting. They told me to delete everything, he said quietly, as if afraid the walls could hear. Board minutes, ownership logs, your voting rights. I sat down, heart tightening. You were supposed to erase me, I said. He nodded, but I didn't. He opened a folder on his laptop labeled Not Forgotten. Then he played a clip. Claire's voice, sharp and dismissive. She's never meant to last. She's emotional dead weight. I didn't flinch, but my throat burned. Another recording played. My mother's voice. We need someone more polished, more reliable. Reliable. That word pulsed in my ears like a wound reopening. I hadn't disappeared. I'd taken unpaid leave to care for Blake, my partner, during chemo. I answered emails from hospital rooms, kept payroll running, scheduled vendor calls between appointments. And they knew it. They'd known all of it. I kept everything Clark said, voice low. Guilt, maybe fear. I didn't agree with what they did, but I didn't have the power to stop it. I looked at him for a long moment. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't trying to be. He was just someone who saw too much and finally couldn't carry the silence anymore. I'm not here to punish you, I said. I'm here to correct what they buried. He handed me a stack of folders and a USB with a shaking hand. There's one more thing, he said. The company retreat, the one you skipped. That's when it started. A chill ran through me. I remembered it. I was spoon-feeding broth to Blake in a cancer center while Claire and the rest of the board posed for photos at some luxury spa in Lake Geneva. That was when my projects were reassigned. That was when the board started whispering. Clark stood silently as I gathered everything. I paused at the door. You won't need to deny anything, I said. I'm not going through the courts. Not yet. Later that night, back at my kitchen island, I plugged in the drive and created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Phoenix. I reopened my LinkedIn dormant for 6 years. I hit reactivate. Messages started pouring in, but one stopped me cold. Still got that spark, it read. Let's build something that's yours this time. Full partner. Your name on the door. Signed, Lyle Parkson. And just like that, another door cracked open. I stared at Lyle's message longer than I should have. His name alone brought back 100 memories, quiet strategy sessions, late-night calls about vendor disputes. The one person at Lawson & Vale who never talked down to me, never treated me like Claire's shadow. When he left, it had been silent, no drama, just a handshake and a nod. I hadn't realized how much his departure hurt until now. I typed back 2 words, let's talk. 2 days later, I stood outside a sleek building in River North, its glass reflecting the morning light like a clean slate. Inside, the scent of cedar espresso and possibility filled the lobby. I caught my reflection in the chrome elevator doors, shoulders square, hair pulled back, eyes steady. I didn't look erased anymore. I looked like someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Lyle greeted me with that same warm professionalism. There she is, he said with a grin. The ghost they tried to bury. He introduced me to his team, sharp, diverse, curious. We sat in a bright conference room where he slid a folder across the table labeled Partner Track. No long ladder, no gatekeeping, just opportunity, real tangible earned. No rush, he said. I know you've got unfinished business. I did, and that business still bore my family name. That night back in my apartment, I opened Clark's USB again. One file jumped out, Bridge Grant Terms Signed.pdf. I opened it out of habit. My breath caught. There was my name, my signature on a contract I never signed. I blinked hard, heart racing. I knew my handwriting. This wasn't it. I grabbed an old notebook from the shelf, one I used to jot down ideas and grocery lists. I compared the G's the way my lowercase letters curled. It wasn't mine. Claire had forged my signature. I felt something cold bloom in my chest. Sloppy, arrogant. She hadn't even bothered to mimic my loops. That contract had been her golden ticket to cut me out of key votes, and now she'd submitted it as evidence in a legal filing. I printed the document and tucked it into a fresh envelope, labeling it in neat handwriting. To the Illinois Office of Business Conduct, confidential, immediate review. They thought I was gone, that I'd walk away quietly, but they forgot who taught Claire half of what she knew. I didn't just build the strategy. I was the strategy, and now I had proof. I stood in the middle of my apartment staring at that envelope like it was a live wire. I didn't want revenge, not anymore. I wanted truth, real, documented, undeniable. I whispered into the silence, let's see how she looks in front of investors. Then I turned to my laptop and hit record. A voice memo, something to keep me grounded. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. I said it moves quietly in documents in shadows and in the hands of the people you tried to erase. The next step would be public, and Claire had no idea the storm was already forming. 2 mornings later, I walked into the Cook County Clerk's office with the kind of calm that feels like steel. The building buzzed with fluorescent light and the low hum of bureaucracy. I waited in line behind a man renewing a business license and a woman arguing over a parking citation. Then finally it was my turn. The clerk behind the plexiglass barely glanced at me as I slid the notarized revocation documents across the counter. Filed, she said, tapping the seal with a practiced flick. Effective immediately. I thanked her and turned to leave. Just before the door swung shut behind me, she called out softly, "This won't stir anything up, will it?" I didn't answer at first. Then I smiled, small and sure. I'm counting on it. Outside, the morning haze was already lifting. I walked slowly, breathing in the air like it tasted different, cleaner, lighter, but my hands still shook slightly as I gripped the leather folio holding every piece of the truth. Back home, I poured myself a coffee and sat at the counter where I once signed loan documents to save the company. I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Contingency. Inside, I found something I'd nearly forgotten, an old iPhone sync backup I'd done for my mother years ago. It held everything, including a voice memo accidentally recorded 3 days before the board voted me out. I clicked play. Claire's voice came through clear and sharp. Meri's loyal, sure, but that's exactly why she won't fight me. She still thinks loyalty counts for something. There it was. No rage, no theatrics, just quiet confirmation of everything I already knew. She didn't fear me. She counted on my silence. And that more than the lies, more than the betrayal is what burned. I didn't delete the file. I renamed it and dropped it into my folder marked exposure. I wasn't planning to use it right away, but when the time came, I'd be ready. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth and ownership, not of the company, not even the legacy, of my name, my work, my worth. That evening, I slipped into a blazer I hadn't worn in over a year, packed a slim flash drive, the revocation notice, and the voicemail recording into my folio. I added one more document, Claire's forged signature, As I zipped the bag, a calm settled over me. Not quiet, not numb, just ready. An hour later, I arrived at the charity gala Claire had orchestrated like a personal coronation. Her name was on everything, the banners, the donor wall, the step and repeat. Langston Legacy, a night of impact. I wasn't on the guest list, didn't matter. I moved through the lobby like I belonged there because once I had built the reason it existed. Inside the ballroom, Claire stood on stage in a floor-length gown, giving a polished speech about resilience, vision, and family values. Her voice was smooth, but when she saw me in the crowd, something flickered in her expression. Just for a second. And that was all I needed. Claire didn't miss a beat, she never did. But I saw the ripple, that tiny flash in her eyes before the mask returned. She kept speaking, a soft smile on her face, voice gliding over the crowd like silk. At Lawson & Vale, we've always believed in legacy. She said, gaze brushing past me like I was nothing but a shadow, in knowing when to lead and when to let go. A polite ripple of laughter followed. She was good, polished, rehearsed, and for years I admired that about her. But not tonight. I didn't flinch. I just raised my glass, met her eyes, and smiled the kind of smile that says, you missed something, and I'm not here for applause. I slipped through the ballroom as the speech wrapped up my heels, soft against the carpet. I didn't need to confront her yet. This wasn't a showdown. It was the turning of a tide. And I wanted her to feel it, without understanding where it was coming from. I made it as far as the coat check before I heard it. The first ripple of panic in her voice behind the curtain. What do you mean, access denied? Her tone was sharp, now clipped. That account is under my authority. A beat. Who signed off on this? The murmur of staff behind the scenes, hurried steps, hushed voices. Then a board member's calm reply. It's been updated, Claire. Legally. We were notified this morning. I didn't stay to watch the unraveling. I already knew how it would go. Denial, confusion, anger. The stages of loss for someone who'd built a throne on paper walls. Outside, the night air was cool and honest. I walked to my car, slowly taking in the silence like medicine. I was halfway across the lot when I heard her voice behind me. You think this is over, she snapped. Her heels clicked too fast, too loud, not in control this time. You've made the biggest mistake of your life. I turned slowly, letting the space stretch between us. Her face was tight, her mouth curled with fury. You really think you can win against me, she hissed. I was chosen. You were convenient. There it was, the truth under the gloss. I stepped aside, clearing her path. Have a lovely evening, Claire, I said, calm and measured. She didn't follow. She just stood there, vibrating with rage. Back home, I kicked off my heels and poured a glass of water, but something stopped me cold. My front door scratched. Not a lot, but enough to make my stomach twist. The mailbox in the lobby was dented like someone had tried to pry it open. Security footage was inconclusive. No face, no plate, no break-in, just enough to rattle the edges of calm. I sat in the dark with my laptop open, fingers resting over the exposure folder. I played the voicemail again, Claire's voice smug, and certain she won't fight back. She never does. Not anymore. Tomorrow, I'd prove that silence wasn't my weakness. It was my setup. The next morning, I parked a block away from the West Ridge Community Center, the old brick building where Claire was scheduled to present to the Neighborhood Development Board. Her white Mercedes was already out front, gleaming like a promise she didn't earn. I sat in my car for a moment, my fingers drumming against the steering wheel. The envelope on the seat beside me was sealed, notarized, and final. My hands brushed over it like a reflex. I wasn't nervous, not in the way I used to be. What I felt now was different, sharper, like clarity distilled into motion. Inside, I didn't rush. Claire's voice floated across the open space long before I saw her. confident, charming, practiced. As acting trustee, she said, I've taken steps to streamline phase 1 of the Langston Riverfront project. Efficiency is everything. That project, those properties, were still partially mine through the family trust. She was presenting them as hers alone. I walked down the side aisle, slowly, not saying a word, and placed the envelope on the table in front of the board chair. Heads turned. Claire's did too. She paused, then smiled, perfectly composed. Well, look who decided to show up, she said lightly, her voice stretching into condescension. I said nothing, just found a seat in the back row. The chair opened the envelope, scanned the documents, and passed them to his colleague. The silence was thick. Then he cleared his throat. Before we proceed, we need a legal review. This revocation affects recent asset decisions. Claire's smile faltered. Oh, come on, she said a little too loudly. This is last-minute theatrics. None of this is official. But her voice cracked just slightly like glass under pressure. The room no longer belonged to her. I didn't stay for the full fallout. I walked out before the whispers grew louder. As I passed the lobby, I heard someone say, I thought she was gone for good. I kept walking. That night I met Trina at a tiny cafe on the north side. The place had fairy lights and a quiet acoustic set playing in the background. She was already there, tucked in a booth tablet, open coffee in hand. You're surgical, she said with a smirk. Surgical leaves scars, I replied. She tapped her screen and slid it toward me. It's ready. The transfers the board vote, the signature you never gave. If you go public, it shakes everything. I stared at the screen, my heart steady. I haven't decided, I said. She didn't push, just nodded. People love a Phoenix story, but they love the fire more. On the drive home, Fleetwood Mac's Landslide came on the radio, my mother's favorite. Her voice echoed in my head, soft and tired. Let her shine, Meri. It's her turn. I whispered to the silence. It was never a turn. It was a sentence. Back home, I opened the drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside was the original ledger wrapped in that faded floral cloth Claire always swore was lost. I never corrected her. I ran my fingers over the fabric, feeling something old and sacred inside me start to shift. Tomorrow I'd decide what kind of fire to set. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the courthouse, the morning sun glinting off the stone steps like a quiet witness to everything I'd endured. Inside, the truth had spoken clearly, firmly, without apology. Claire's forged documents had unraveled under legal scrutiny, her polished story torn at the seams by cold facts and forgotten signatures. I didn't smile when the judge ruled in my favor. I didn't need to. I had already reclaimed something far more valuable than control I had reclaimed myself. That night, I returned to the co-working studio I helped launch, surrounded by women who had also been pushed aside, discounted, erased. My space was small, but mine a corkboard, a single window facing east, and in the corner, the old pine chair my father made. I'd polished it, added a plaque. For the one who stayed silent, then spoke the loudest. I sat down, breathed deep, and felt stillness settle over me. Not silence, not surrender, just peace. Because betrayal doesn't define you, what you build afterward does. Loyalty isn't weakness when it's rooted in strength. And sometimes to rise again, you have to let the fire come. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt erased or underestimated, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. Share your moment of rising. And don't forget to subscribe, because your voice deserves a seat at the table. Always.